In today's video, I wanted to continue with my journey through the main questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. Last time, I received a quest from Queen Obki regarding the Queen Mother, Minisera. Traveling to Castle Necromagon, Minisera's secret fortress, I was able to recover some suspicious letters. They wrote about King Lysandis' mistress, as well as an orcish massacre brought on by Minisera's father. Next, I traveled to Castle Wayrest and met with Prince Helsif. He wanted me to deliver a letter to Lord Castellian, the senior member of Daggerfall's Elder Council. Doing so, it turned out to be an attempt at blackmailing the Lord, and it ended up working. Castellian agreed to meet with Helsif, essentially becoming the prince's puppet. After that, a courier approached me and delivered a mysterious letter. It ended up being from the Prince of Sentinel, Loten. In exchange for information on King Lysandis, Loten wanted me to learn the truth about his missing brother, Storner. After hearing from one of the Underking's contacts, I was sent to the dungeon of Castle Fallam and learned what became of the missing prince. Relaying the information to Loten, he held up his end of the bargain and told me more details about Lysandis' mistress. Her name is Medora Dureni, a noble woman and former court sorceress for Daggerfall. Then finally, the most recent quest I did was for a maid at Castle Daggerfall. Sindasa had asked me to travel to Tristor Laboratory in Bettany. There, I was to slay a werewolf. Doing so, the beast ended up being her brother. This was me putting him out of his misery. In exchange for the deed, Sindasa revealed that the Emperor's letter was intended for Queen Minisera. However, Obki was the one who ended up opening it, and after reading its contents, it's unknown if it ever made it to Minisera. After all, according to Morgaya, the letter's since been stolen and sold off to Gortwog, leader of the Orcs. This is where the story continues. Before embarking on my next adventure, I needed to do a bit of a weight dump. Not to brag or anything, but my gold was quite literally weighing me down. So I paid a visit to the bank and deposited some septims. Then I sold off some of my less useful items like ingredients and books. When ready, I traveled back to Castle Daggerfall and went to interact with a key player for this whole story, Queen Mother Minisera. There's been a lot of rumors and talks surrounding her, so it's finally time to see what she has to say for herself. Minisera is located in one of the castle's side rooms. It's the one that's opposite of Sindasa's. Interacting with the door, it displays a message saying that this is the private chambers of the royal family. Essentially, it's a warning. If you don't have business in there, you probably don't want to go in, and for good reason. Pressing on the door again, it swings open and Minisera's on the other side. She's nice and calm, but the court's battle mages, knights, warriors, and rogues aren't. Everyone who essentially looks like an enemy that I fought in prior dungeons becomes an enemy now. Interestingly, coming in here isn't considered a crime. I suppose it just triggers the court's bodyguards or something of the sorts. From here on out though, every time I went to see Minisera, I'd have a small scuffle on my hands. Chatting with the Queen Mother, she welcomes me and says that she's heard much about my deeds. It seems as though I've just told her about Sindasa's personal account, as Minisera makes mention of Queen Obki's deception. From here, she confirms my suspicions, that the letter was never handed to her. Minisera asks me to look further into it, but warns that it could be dangerous. Sticking my nose into Obki's affairs might enrage Gothrid, and the Queen Mother asks if I'm okay to take that risk. As far as I'm concerned, Gothrid can suck an egg. Agreeing to her task, Minisera relays more information. She's always had concerns regarding Obki. After all, she is the daughter of the late King Cameron, the ruler of Sentinel and Lysandis' enemy. Minisera then goes off on a small tangent. Since this is more than likely going to become relevant later, I'll include this part of her dialogue. She mentions that both kings died at the Battle of Crinegain. However, Lysandis' body was never recovered. The court and his loved ones simply mourn the king's monument that was erected after his death. Here, Minisera switches back to the task at hand. Apparently, the Emperor uses someone named Carolyn Yeomhart as his messenger in the Kingdom of Daggerfall. If anyone would know about the letter, it'd be her. At the moment, her whereabouts are unknown though. However, Carolyn is apparently a member of the Knights of the Dragon. Minisera thinks that if I get to one of her guildmates, specifically someone named Gwyneria Ashcroft at the Heartsmith residence in Tunwich, I can learn more about Carolyn's location. Luckily for me, there's no time limit for this one, so there's a lot less stress on my end. Now, interestingly, if you recall my conversation with Lady Brisciana way back when, you might remember the courier being a topic of interest. Due to the ongoing war, the courier that the Emperor had hired ended up handing the letter off to someone else, someone who likely knew the land better and could blend in with the region's hostilities. This someone was referred to as a he. Since Carolyn is a woman, it's likely not the same courier. What's more, the courier that the player has to find is actually a randomized NPC, so it can be a man or woman. With a relaxed detail like that, it leads me to believe that even if it was a man, it's not the original courier. This is either a discrepancy in the game, as whoever delivered the letter was not the intended courier, according to Brissiana, or Brissiana was lied to and the courier was the same person. Maybe whoever relayed that information to her was trying to throw her off her track. After all, she did say that her position within Daggerfall's court was compromised. The third option is that it was the Emperor's intention all along to have the letter handed off from the original courier to Carolyn. Perhaps the story was that the deliverer had to be switched due to the war, but in all reality, it was for their own safety. Honestly, who knows, and it more than likely doesn't matter. It was just something that popped up in my head. Alright, back to the matter at hand. Traveling to Tunwich, I began asking around about Gwyneria Ashcroft, Yeomhart's contact. Most people couldn't or wouldn't tell me any details. However, all it takes is one good Samaritan to give me what I need. After being pointed in the right direction, I entered the Hearthfield residence, a bit off from the Heartsmith residence, and found Ashcroft. Speaking with her, she introduced herself and got straight to business. Because I bore Minnesera's signet ring, she told me that Carolyn would be at the Aldingwall Palace in 31 days. Now, traveling to Aldingwall was only an 8-day expedition, max. I really didn't want to rest at an inn for the next 552 in-game hours, which really would have been over 9 real-world minutes. So, I'm unsure if this was the best strategy or not, but traveling around from region to region was a much faster way to kill time, and it was free. After hopping from city to city for the next 23 days, I returned to Aldingwall and entered its palace. In one of the side rooms, I located an NPC who most certainly wasn't there before. Speaking with her, it ended up being Carolyn Yeomhart. Her initial reaction to my presence was a little aggressive. She flaunted her status with her guild, as well as her role in the Empire. She then said that the last time someone ambushed her, she managed to disembowel them. However, after seeing the signet ring, Yeomhart eases up. She explains that she received the letter from the Emperor some time ago. It was addressed to the Queen of Daggerfall. Since Obki is the Queen and not Minnesera, Carolyn is unsure why her and I are even having this conversation. In order to prove her trustworthiness, Yeomhart hands me Obki's signet ring, something that was handed to her through the Queen's gratitude. I'm to relay this information to Minnesera, and I'm to show her the ring. Leaving the residence, I was certainly a bit confused. Sindasa mentioned that Obki knew that the letter wasn't for her, yet she read it anyways. Now, Yeomhart is saying that the letter was actually for her. Returning to Daggerfall and speaking with Minnesera, she ends up clearing up the confusion. When sending the letter, Uriel Septim simply addressed it to the Queen of Daggerfall. When the letter had arrived, Lysandus was dead and Minnesera was no longer queen. Hence, Obki opened up the letter. I suppose there was some confusion on Obki's part, but after that she said she'd deliver it to Minnesera. So she's not really absolved and the Queen Mother still doesn't trust her. Now, this next part is sort of timeline dependent. Apparently, Minnesera received a letter from Morgaya of Wayrest. The princess claimed to know something about the Emperor's letter. Minnesera then tells me to come back if I learn anything regarding the letter's whereabouts. Having already done Morgaya's favor, I know who stole the letter and who currently possesses it, something that will be touched on rather shortly. As a thank you, Minnesera lets me keep Obki's ring, as the Queen Mother has no desire to own anything of her daughter-in-laws anymore. Well, the plot certainly thickens, and like I mentioned a couple of quests ago, all it takes is one or two missing pieces to really connect the dots here. I think with Morgaya's information, I'm about to stumble onto some groundbreaking discoveries. Now, really quick, there is an alternative piece of dialogue that comes from Queen Obki herself. If I were to have gone to her before finishing the quest with Minnesera, she would have come clean about the letter. Well, not really clean, more of a half-truth. She admits to losing it, as it was stolen from her, but she lies about not reading it. Obki asks that if I were to find it, I hand it over to her. She'd like to be the one who personally hands it to Minnesera, which we know would never happen. This doesn't fail the quest by any means, but it does affect the player's reputation with certain factions. As we'll soon come to learn, other than the obvious, there's a whole separate reason as to why Obki might lie about reading the letter, and that reason might be for the benefit of Sentinel. Wasting no time, I returned to Minnesera at the castle and got into the next quest. My character is able to tell the Queen Mother that Gortwog has the Emperor's letter. Minnesera thinks for a moment and comes up with an idea on how to get it back. Before proceeding though, she asks me if I'm willing to brave the depths of Orsinium. Hitting her with a 2-old thumbs up, she gets into the details. According to the Queen Mother, Gortwog wants nothing more than to be officially recognized by the Emperor. This would bring on peace between the Empire and the Orcs. Honestly, it's a very commendable goal. Minnesera hands me a letter and tells me to present it to the King of Orcs. The hope is that he's persuaded to hand the Queen's letter over to me. Well, taking a look at said letter, it reads, Lord Gortwog, King of Orcs, Warlord of the Subterranean Realms, hail and long life King Gortwog. Long have you and the Orcish people sought formal recognition by the Empire. My dead husband, King Lysandus, supported your claim to sovereign rule. I would now help you in your cause. Sadly, a minor missive from the Emperor has been misplaced. For me to truly hold the trust and ear of Emperor Uriel's septum, I need to reclaim this note. Should you be able to place in my servant's hand this trifling letter, I would be far better able to forward your claim to the Emperor and his court. The Dowager Minnesera, Queen Mother to King Gothrid of Daggerfall. Having been around the block before, I know that there's more to this letter than meets the eye. It's certainly not blackmail, but it's something akin to it. Finally, I get to visit the famous Orsinium. I've heard about this place from Orcs and future Elder Scrolls titles, and I've read about it in the in-game books. However, I've never gotten to lay eyes on it, so what a treat from the game. Orsinium as a region is actually rather small. In terms of landmarks, there are only a few that pop up on the map. I only had the towns filter on, but even so, the only visible dungeon in the area is the localized spot of Orsinium. Doing some side research, it turns out that the player has to find the other ones for themselves, which is quite interesting. Now, traveling over, I was actually caught off guard by all of the houses here. It sort of humanized the Orcs. At least that's the message that I felt was being conveyed. Instead of surrounding themselves in destruction and chaos, it shows that they can be civil and are able to integrate into modern-day Tamrielic society. Now, entering a handful of these homes, surprisingly, there were humans in there. What's more, they were all full-grown women. No men or children in sight. I wondered what the story there was, but either way, when ready, I continued on with the task at hand and entered the Orc stronghold. Without missing a beat, I was set upon by one of their warriors. As soon as that one died, I had caught the attention of another, and had to fight for my life all over again. Honestly, I never really mind fighting Orcs. To me, they feel the same as fighting human warriors and barbarians. So if this was all I had to deal with, it wasn't really cause for concern. When Gortwog's goons were dealt with, I slipped past his other lackeys and approached the king himself. Speaking with him and handing over the paper, he recognized Minnesera's letter for what it was, a plea of desperation. Gortwog says that he has no use for the Emperor's letter anymore, and that I'm free to retrieve it. However, it's buried deep within the stronghold. The Orcs of Orsinium will not let a Redguard roam the halls freely. So, my goal is to survive his realm and take back the letter. If I succeed, Gortwog will also consider me a worthy Redguard. Well, I'm not sure how much that last part will be worth, but exiting the conversation, the fun begins almost immediately. An Orc warrior bursts through the door behind me, and as soon as he's dealt with, Gortwog's lackeys decide that they want a piece of the action too. It definitely set the tone for the rest of the crawl. As you could probably imagine, Orsinium is a large dungeon. Traveling through here was one of my longer expeditions. I spent more time in here than I did Tristor Laboratory, but it was still certainly nowhere near as long as Castle Fallen. To me, at least so far, that's my Daggerfall horror story, but I'm sure something much worse will come eventually. As for enemies, surprise surprise, they were all Orcs. Well, there was one grizzly bear, but that was the extent of enemy diversity down here. The Orcs were mostly simple warriors too. A couple of successful hits with my sword and they'd be dead. Meanwhile, if they landed a hit, my health would go down by a bit, but nothing too serious. Only in the beginning did I face an Orc shaman, and towards the end an Orc sergeant. I'd have to assume that they were a little stronger than their warrior counterparts, but who knows. Something else I liked about Orsinium is that it felt easy to navigate. At least to get to the Emperor's letter, it mostly consisted of long, simple hallways. Really, the only two landmark rooms were the one with the small pyramid at its center and the one with the letter in it. I could tell the pyramid room was either meant to offer the player a different crawl area so they could explore more of Orsinium in hopes of grinding and finding treasure, or if there are other quests that run through here, it's where they'd branch off to, leading the player into different questing spaces of the dungeon. As for the room with the letter, it was actually a pretty neat chamber. It was shaped like a square, and I popped out on a raised platform. At the center was an altar with the Emperor's letter. Heading down there, of course, it wouldn't be so easy. As I approached the paper, 4 Orcs popped out of secret doors and closed in for the attack. Luckily for me, they came out in waves, making them a lot easier to handle. Otherwise, this would have been a multiple tries kind of fight. Once the threats were eliminated, I snagged the letter, and of course, I had to read it. It said, "Queen Minnesera, I have grave news. The totem of Tiber's septum has been found. You know what this means. The power behind Tiber Septim could be unleashed upon Tamriel again. Rumor has it that Lord Woodbourne, a minor lord of Wayrest, has possession of it. He will doubtless lose it soon. You must persuade him to turn it over to you or Lady Brisciana. The court of Wayrest has no love of King Lysandus, but you still have influence there. I am asking you to use it on my behalf. Uriel Septim, Emperor of Tamriel. Well, the plot thickens. Even though I don't know the specifics of the specifics, something tells me this may be one of the few connecting pieces that I need for the story. The Totem of Tiber Septim, something that could have a massive impact on all of Tamriel. At first, I thought that this letter might have had some influence over the war between Daggerfall and Sentinel. But considering the letter only arrived after the fact and that this Lord Woodbourne is in Wayrest, it doesn't seem likely. Either way, I'd end up getting more answers soon enough. Successfully exiting Orsinium, I traveled to the kingdom of Daggerfall and met with Minisera once more. Handing the letter over to her, she immediately recognized how dangerous it was. She believes that Gortwog would have sold copies to every faction and kingdom in the Iliac Bay. Whoever ends up with the Totem of Tiber Septim will end up gaining an immense amount of power. Her ending dialogue is quite dismissive and not very satisfying. She thinks that the totem will more than likely find its way into my life, and if it does, I do well to remember that it'll only be safe with the Emperor. Like I said, I was just left with a lot of questions and thoughts still. I was hoping that Minisera would shed more light on the subject than that, but alas, we can't always get what we wish for. But the key word there is always, as sometimes dreams do come true. As I was leaving the castle, not just one letter was delivered to my character, but 2 couriers came for me and handed me notes. One helps to share context on the Totem of Tiber Septim, and the other introduces a new threat to the player. Now, to start things off, I wanted to read the note that's quote, from a friend. I think we know where Skyrim got its inspiration from. The other one is titled, You Are Being Watched, which of course is even creepier, but that one is more relevant for what's to come. From a friend goes as follows. Dear Bard, Numidium was Tiber Septim's secret weapon in his bid for supreme power. A 1,000-foot-tall automaton, a golem or an atronach of sorts, powered by a gem called the Mantella. The Mantella was infused with the life force of Tiber Septim's Imperial Battle Mage, and with it, Septim crushed all who stood in his way. After the complete and total defeat of all of his opponents, Septim began using Numidium to crush the neutral royal families of Tamriel so that he could enthrone only persons he knew to be loyal. His Imperial Battle Mage was furious at this use of his creation, and fought to reclaim the Mantella. In the ensuing battle, both the created and the creator were vanquished, the heart they shared blown out of this reality into the netherworld they call Aetherius. Numidium's body was scattered throughout Tamriel, and the Imperial Battle Mage, without his life force, went into a semi-slumber in a subterranean vault. In the centuries that followed, the Emperor's elite soldiers, for generation after generation, collected the pieces of the Numidium and became known as the Blades. Tiber Septim's Imperial Battle Mage became known as the Underking, and set his forces out to find the Mantella. Be warned, therefore, those who search for the Totem of Tiber Septim are searching for the mechanism the first Emperor of Tamriel used to control Numidium. Should Numidium return, he or she who holds the totem will control Tamriel's fate. Signed, a friend. Alright, let's unpack all of this. The mighty Numidium, the brass god / dwarven creation, is what everyone's so afraid of. It has the means to dominate and control the whole continent. Essentially, it makes its controller the most powerful person. However, without the Totem of Tiber Septim, aka the Mantella, the Underking, former battle mage of Tiber Septim's life force, it's inoperable. Yet, according to the Emperor's letter, Lord Woodbourne of Wayrest was in possession of it. This was some time ago though, so who even knows if he still has it? It sounds like the current atmosphere of Daggerfall is sort of like the Lord of the Rings. Everyone is vying for the Mantella. All parties and factions, good, neutral, and evil, are searching, scheming, and killing for it. It does sound as though Numidium itself is in the Empire's possession though, so I'd assume that whoever owns the Mantella would have to make it through to the Brass God first. Next, the letter also sheds some light on Tiber Septim's conquest. I suppose it makes sense that as a new ruler, you'd want to put your loyal subjects in positions of power. However, if you have to kill off all of the neutral royal families to even do so, you probably didn't properly unite the realms to begin with. I suppose I can now understand why there's a lot of controversy surrounding the Third Empire and their rise to power. Next, I wanted to touch on something that I mentioned a couple of quests ago. I had said that the player was a member of the Blades. I mean, when you think about it, the job description is exactly that. You're an undercover agent for the Emperor. You're trying to achieve the Empire's goals in foreign lands, and you're more or less a trained fighter. Now, this letter from a friend gives a brief explanation for who the Blades are and what they've accomplished. They likely don't know who the player actually is and what they're trying to do, so it makes sense that they'd explain the player's own faction to them. While I don't know if anyone in the game will ever outright refer to the player as a Blade, I believe it's practically confirmed by the community and possibly even the developers that your character is a member of the Third Empire's operatives. Now, the last thing I wanted to discuss is that you will receive different letters depending on which factions the player is aligned with. I believe that I got the most detailed letter, but the other two do offer untold details that help to paint a better picture. For example, the shortest letter mentions that the Underking placed a seal on the Mantella. Only someone of great power or of the Septim lineage can use the totem. Otherwise, they'll be instantly killed. So while the threat is still great, it's not as though any Joe Schmo villager can control Numidium. Then, the middle-length one mentions something peculiar, and for me, I could only really piece together thanks to the texts that I read in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, a title that came out 10 years after Daggerfall. The book in Oblivion is called The Path of Transcendence, and it talks about how a necromancer can become a lich. Essentially, they have to imbue their life force in some physical object, and this can take a very long time. Well, the third letter from a friend says that Numidium's life force was its Mantellan heart. Since the battle mage imbued his life force into the Mantella, a process necessary for lichdom, moving one's soul into a physical object, does that mean that the Underking is a lich? Without more context or having met with the battle mage, it's hard to say. However, that's an answer I might receive in due time. Alright, for now, let's forget about letters to friends and let's switch over to the other letter, the one that's titled You Are Being Watched. This one reads, Bard, if you don't want to be dead as Lysandus, stop your investigations immediately. Do you really want to risk your life for a dead man? You are being watched. For the time being, there aren't any leads for this letter. However, as the game goes on, surprise attacks start to occur on my character. Warriors and barbarians appear out of nowhere and aggro onto me. Admittedly, the timeline for these series of quests is a little jumbled for my playthrough. Essentially, after enough of the assaults have taken place, I would have received a letter from Princess Elysana of Castle Wayrest. She invites me to speak with her so that way we can exchange favors. However, this is actually the second quest that she offers the player. The first one has a rather brief window. It's only available once I've hit level 6 and before I've completed Orcish Emancipation, the quest for the Emperor's Letter. Fortunately, I had saved right before I entered Orsinium. Even though I'm jumping back a bit on the timeline for this one, I think it's 100% worth showing off, as it clearly demonstrates the kind of person that Princess Elysana is. So, approaching her at Castle Wayrest, prior to finishing my work with Minnesera, she introduces herself and offers me her first quest. Elysana is the eldest daughter of King Aedwir, and heir to the throne of Wayrest. For this mission, Elysana admits that she's gotten herself into a bit of a situation and would like my help to get her out. Lord Castellian, the senior member of the Elder Council and the subject for Prince Helsith's quest, has forgotten his cloak at the castle. Elysana apparently borrowed it from him, and she'd like for me to return it to him at Yeomhart Palace. She offers me compensation in the form of a torque. Accepting the quest, she hands me the robe and gives me his exact location. Elysana would like for me to return to her in no more than 16 days. Sounding simple enough, it took me about 4 days to travel to Yeomhart Palace, which left me with at least 8 days to deal with Lord Castellian. That shouldn't have been a problem at all. Once daytime hit, I began asking around for the Woodham residence. To be honest, I couldn't remember if this was the same house where I originally found Lord Castellian for Helsith's quest. It sort of sounds familiar, but at the same time, both quests give the player a random town and random residence in Wayrest to go to, so it's probably not the same place. In any case, locating Lord Castellian and interacting with him, things hit the fan really quick. The Lord dropped dead on the spot. All he said was, "A gift from Lady Elysana? Thank you, Bard, it fits like a glove." Then, following that, it says that my character feels a tearing sound, almost as if reality was being torn open. There's still no explanation as to why he died, at least not right now. From here, the Woodham residence turns into a battleground. Lord Castellian's guards spawn in and begin attacking. Acting in self-defense and swinging back, the guards accuse me of killing Castellian. They believe that since I was in the room with him last, I was the one who struck him down, and honestly, it's a fair assumption. The manhunt ends as soon as I exit the house, but that's not all. In the Woodham residence, there are these beings I've never seen before. They have the form of a woman, yet they're able to transform into these harpy-like beings. They also let out a devious laugh, practically as if this is all a game to them. It was definitely a confusing and shocking interaction. How and why did Lord Castellian die? Well, striking the Daedric seducers, as that's what they are, they say, "Leave this place, little Redguard. We have come to claim Lord Castellian. You have done your part by delivering his funeral shroud which summoned us." Barely escaping the residence, I think I can now piece together what happened. The cloak was not Lord Castellian's, hence him thinking it was a gift. The shroud was an assassination attempt, and it worked. The wearer gets 3 Daedric seducers sicked on them. I guess Castellian's guards are none the wiser though, as they still insisted that I was the killer. This creates uncertainty and confusion surrounding his death, and furthermore, it shows just how dangerous Princess Elysana can be. Interestingly, it is possible for the player to wear the robe first and have 3 seducers descend on them, getting a feel for what's to come. However, if all 3 of them are defeated, it puts a hard stop to the quest. If one is left alive, then the robe can still be delivered to Castellian. The main difference though is that you'll know what's coming. Now, returning to Castle Wayrest, I was cautious when approaching Elysana. How much was I supposed to see, and what exactly was I not supposed to know? Well, in a rather psychotic manner, Elysana didn't really touch on the obvious. She instead gifted me the torque and praised me for my work. She then said that she hoped Castellian appreciated all the hard work that she put into the robe, calling it a real attention getter. Again, just a scary interaction. The last part of Elysana's dialogue is particularly interesting though. She says that King Aedwir is looking for the totem of Tiber's septum, and that when he finds it, he'll need someone to retrieve it for him. The princess says that she'll mention my name, and if I get chosen, there are plenty of riches and fame to come. You can see just how soulless Elysana is with those beady eyes. Why she wanted Lord Castellian dead in the first place is beyond me. Maybe it's related to the totem of Tiber's septum. Maybe it has to do with Prince Helseth's blackmail. I read that apparently Castellian wanted to marry Elysana, but she didn't feel the same way. Perhaps that's a contributing factor too. In any case, now that we've seen what Elysana is capable of, let's jump forward in time. We're now back to the current timeline, where I had just finished with Orcish emancipation and received the 2 letters. Chatting with Princess Elysana again, she sweet talks my character and name drops Lord Woodbourne, which is of interest to me. After all, he was the last known owner of the totem of Tiber's septum. It sounds as though she's in contact with him, which could mean she has a lead on the Mantella. Furthermore, she knows that I'm actively looking for it. She plays coy and calls it a totem pole. This feels like it's an attempt to lead me to believe that she doesn't know much about it, but I've seen what she's capable of, and I know just how cunning she can be. As it would turn out, she has a separate contact who might have some information regarding the Mantella's whereabouts. The only thing that she'd like in return for the information is that I escort her cousin, Elasa Asham, to the contact, Dunrick Moorfield. Accepting the quests, Elysana says that her cousin loves adventure and that she's excited to spend time with Dunrick. Moorfield is apparently at the Kingsmith residence in the Feather and Huntsman Hostel of the region of Daggerfall. What's more, to sweeten the deal, after the job is done, Dunrick will further reward me with 570 gold pieces. Truly, this feels like it's too good to be true, and wouldn't you know it, it is. Leaving Wayrest, Elasa's icon appears on my screen, indicating that the princess's cousin is now following me. Fortunately, there's no time limit for this quest, so there's less pressure, which was very helpful for what was to come. Traveling to the Feather and Huntsman Hostel, we arrived late at night. Since there were no NPCs out and about, I decided to rest at one of the local inns. Interestingly, none of the people in there had Dunrick Moorfield as a dialogue prompt, and I'm not sure if that was a small bug or if I needed to do something else first. Either way, attempting to sleep, I was awoken by an enemy. An opponent had actually tried to get to me while I was at a tavern. It was one of those aforementioned warriors/barbarians that are brought to you by the "You Are Being Watched" note. Defeating them in combat, they had a separate note in their inventory. It simply read, "Kill Bard before too much is learned. Use any means." This wouldn't end up being an isolated incident either. In fact, these attacks would go on all night long. Eventually, I defeated 4 or 5 of them. All of them dropped the same kind of note except for one. The outlier said, "Bard needs to die, no excuses." Interestingly, they were all signed by the letter W. For now, I'm not really sure who that could be. Either way, the plot continues to thicken. At one point, after winning another battle, Elasa tells me that I'm much tougher than Elysana said I'd be. Unsure of what to make of that, it only gets stranger. After my final tussle, Elasa speaks up again. She asks who those barbarians were, citing that they almost killed me. She then makes a very dire mistake. Asham says, maybe you should just forget about Lysandus' ghost. How did she know that I was looking into that, and why would she even bring that up? Right after that, the princess's cousin makes a break for the exit, and disappears. While I have an idea of what's going on here, more information gets revealed if I just continue with the quest. As soon as morning comes, I located the Kingsmith residence and found Elysana's contact. Now, chatting with Dunrick Moorfield, I again believe his dialogue was bugged, as technically I was supposed to receive a different response from him. What he says is short and brief. He seems confused and acknowledges Elysana. This shouldn't be the case though, considering she ran off last night. Nervous, he tosses me the bag of gold and acts as though he doesn't know anything about the totem. After that, he runs off and I don't really get much closure. No one else in the game talks about what happened, and Lady Elysana doesn't shed any more light on it either. Technically though, from here the quest is complete and I could just forget about it. However, because we all deserve to hear the other ending, instead of playing dumb, Dunrick Moorfield quickly explains what had happened. A mysterious man in a grey cloak approached him and asked Dunrick to set me up. The barbarians attacked me on the long journey in hopes of killing me, as detailed by the note. As for Elysana, she's not actually Elysana's cousin. She's just some girl that they found off of the street. She was just used as an excuse to get me out this way. As it would turn out, Moorfield never had any information on the totem. Elysana knew that by just hearing that, my ears would perk up. So, at this point, it's more than clear that the princess sees me as a threat and is trying to have me eliminated, similar to what she did to Castellian. She sent me the letter saying that I was being watched, and she sent assassins after me. Clearly, if that's the case, I'm on the right path. Perhaps I'm getting closer to solving the mystery of the Mantella, and in turn, the mystery of why Lysandus is haunting Daggerfall.